So, hello friends of the digital image. With this video I want to compare two excellent Sony cameras with each other, which couldn't be more different, but at the same time they have a lot of similarities. But because of their higher price, it is really worth to reflect a while before making your decision. On one side here we have the DSC RX10 M3 and on the other side DSC RX100 Mark IV. At the same time we want to look ahead towards the upcoming DSC RX105 and we want to decide if it is necessary to still wait for the RX105 in case that the RX100 Mark IV should be more relevant for your decision. As you can already see here very clearly, those two cameras are very different in sense of size and weight, which is the first point that I want to mention here. The RX100 Mark IV has a monitor here that can be bent over 180 degrees and therefore it can be used for selfies because you can mirror yourself in this digital screen. This possibility doesn't exist in the RX10 Mark III, but still you can bend it more than 90 degrees in such a way, for example. Size and weight are really relevant because this camera you can easily transport in the pocket of your jacket, while this is for sure not going to be possible with that camera here. So you will always be dependent on a belt or a backpack or a camera bag to be able to use this point-and-shoot camera. There is one professional aspect to this camera. Here on the downside you can connect it to a tripod. Besides the unfoldable monitor, there is an additional viewfinder which pops up, but after that you are not able to use it immediately because you have to pull it out a little bit further to the back, which requires additional time and effort. So this is not so much handy as we would wish it to be. Also, to push it back into the camera, you have to first push this little unit back in, and only after that you can push it down again. On the other hand, after having activated the RX10 Mark III and after the lens has unfolded, you can immediately switch between just looking at the screen or looking directly into the excellent viewfinder of the machine. This is much more convenient and intuitive while handling the camera. In reference to the size, there is one more major difference. This lens has a zoom range of 24 to 70, which we will be able to see in pictures in a second, while this camera here can zoom out from 24mm up to 600, and there is only very few cameras on this planet in combination with this superior image sensor quality. Okay, so now this is like audio test and image test of the zoom at the same time. This is the full range of 24mm, but now when we go left up here towards the church tower, then we start to zoom in and we have to discover that unfortunately, if we would like to get closer to this cross up there, then we are limited to 70mm zoom with the RX100 Mark IV. And now we switch over to the other camera. Okay, so now this is the sound and zoom test of the RX10 Mark III. And we are using a pure optical zoom towards the cross on top of the tower. Okay, this is more or less about how close you can get with this camera, and if you think that this is important for you, such a function, you will not be able to avoid the higher packaging weight and also the larger dimensions of this camera, as you can see. This is shot with the active intelligent steady shot directly from the hand. one more in reference to the point and shoot aspect. The question is if this camera is really handy or not. Look, I don't have such a big hands, but still my thumb in relation to all these small buttons down here is already quite big, and therefore you have a little bit the impression that everything is just a little bit too small in this camera. And sometimes you may be not really sure if you are actually switching on or off the camera or shooting a photograph. Also, this dialer wheel here, where you can switch between the different programs, is actually very small or tiny and not so easily accessible. Here in front you have a multifunctional wheel. On one hand you can use it for selecting the different f-stops, or you can switch between different scene selections, or also as a focus ring. So depending on the situation you can apply different functions to this ring, but as the second ring you have to get along with this small ring down here on the right. While on the other hand, here with the RX10 M3, there is several rings at your disposal. I'll take off the lens cover and also this light shade here, which actually you also can fix the other way around to start to make sense. Here we have an f-stop selector and then two more rings which can also perform different functions. For example, in this case as an alternative to the zoom button here in front of the trigger. And the second ring here, for example, if you switch the camera into the manual focus mode, then in the end you will be much closer to the experience of the usage of a conventional analog camera or any kind of digital mirror reflex camera, even though this is just a compact point-and-shoot camera with the incredible zoom range of 24 to 600. And here as an alternative you will still see one more, the maximum digital zoom which this camera can do at cost of a lower resolution. This is like incredible zoom range. I don't want to imagine how close I am now, but we should not forget that we are still standing here on this parking lot in the middle of Berlin. So now let's get back to where we actually are. I want to add one more, that this camera here really has the advantage that whenever you switch it on, the lens is opening and it is immediately ready to use. So that means point and shoot can really happen here and now. While with this RX10 Mark III here, one is always forced to take off the lens cap. I mean, still there is some kind of connectors, but still it would just hang around. You always have to put it into your pockets or place it somewhere, and therefore you would risk to either forget it or that dust may start to collect. And in so far this is a little bit less comfortable comparing to the automatic lens cover of the RX100 Mark IV. The different scene selections, we will get there one more a little bit later in the studio. I want to add actually one more thing. Look, when you see here my thumb in relation to all those buttons on the camera and also in reference to the index finger on top of the trigger, this leads to an altogether much more handy handling. You can really sense precisely the zoom button next to the trigger, and additionally here is also an on-top display for this camera from where you can read directly the most important values. And similar to the RX100 Mark IV, you can unfold the flash by using this button, as you can see here. So this is a very similar principle, but what on the other hand is missing on top of this camera here is actually this multi-interface shoe here, where you can certainly connect an external flash, but also it gives you access to all kind of other Sony like external microphones that you can connect here, or control monitors and so on. Here on the side there is one more button which enables you to lock the focus while in automatic focus mode. This aperture ring here at the moment is clicking into these different f-stops, but here if you deactivate this function here at the lower side of the camera, then you really have the possibility to glide smoothly between different f-stops and therefore create interesting depth of field effects. With the standard steady shot of the RX100 Mark IV, we want to test the selfie function. This bendable screen here, I don't ever really use it, because this then automatically seduces our eyes to look at the screen instead of looking into the lens of the camera, which is much more interesting to look directly towards the lens, because this creates a direct contact. And here, as an alternative with the RX10 Mark III, we are trying to check the autofocus to find out how well this camera will manage to focus on the moving object in front of the lens. With this much more heavy model, on one hand, it is maybe, because of its weight, a little bit more stable in our hands, as long as we are strong enough to hold it up. And on the other hand, we don't have the monitor, and as you can see, the autofocus seems to do quite a good job. Okay, so now welcome back to the studio. One short look into the menu. For sure, we can record photographs in RAW or in JPEG compression, as well as for movies we have even 4K resolution available. But we know from a lot of other reviews that this camera has a problem to overheat actually while recording 4K, so after 5 minutes this will switch off by itself. Doesn't really make sense to work with 4K. Also, as you can see in the down left corner here, this camera has a built-in ND filter, which is not existing in the RX10 Mark III. With this camera you're welcomed by little different menus. For example, when you change into the scene menu, first you have this kind of welcome screen which explains about everything you can do here. This you have to confirm with enter, and then you can switch between different standard sets. The difference is that here you also have a menu for pets with most probably short exposure times, and then also you have a menu option for doing food photography, which starts to be quite popular at the time, and one more option to do photographs of fireworks, which also doesn't exist in the RX10 Mark III. As you can see here, one more in the menu for the scene selection. The last three menus we just saw now in the Mark IV, they are missing here. Yeah, we have only those ones to choose from. So then there is one more little detail which I really like about this camera here. In front you have this ring to do your settings, and when you go to the manual mode, if you want to change the aperture, then you can use this wheel here in front and it makes this beautiful sound. And this is somehow also this attitude of the camera to be somehow a professional camera being represented in that way. And this wheel here in front would be then for selecting between the different exposure times. So here one more, the noises the camera makes in detail, switching on. Taking out the viewfinder. Opening the flash. And then let's go to automatic mode to hear the zoom of the focus lens. That's what you can imagine from the sound. RX10 Mark III, the sound of opening the lens cup, switching the camera on, switching between the programs, using the zoom. And let's listen to the autofocus. There we almost don't hear anything. It's much more silent comparing to the RX100 Mark IV. In the end, I want to mention one more little detail, that even though those cameras, they have such an amazingly different size, still the size of their monitor is actually exactly the same, in the same way as they are also using the same sensor, the Exmor sensor. So, and in the very end here, last but not least, the preview to the RX100 Mark V. From outside you will almost not be able to differentiate between them, because they will have the same size, the same weight, the same internal structures in sense of sensor and lenses and so on. But the Mark V will come with a much faster autofocus, which is probably similar to the Alpha 6300, and therefore it can still be interesting to wait until this RX100 Mark V comes out, because we discovered during some of our test recordings that the focus of the RX10 Mark IV seemed to be a little bit more slow than in our concurrence model RX10 Mark III camera.